Okay, so I got a new Commodore SX-64, first color, portable color computer. And there's a couple of things. The side, the little handle caps here are missing. So we're gonna 3D print those. That's typical. I already tested this. I already did this in a previous video, so I didn't do it again, but I replaced the PLA in it because it had a white screen. So you can watch a previous video for that. So the PLA has been replaced. Checked out the disk drive, that works fine. Everything's great, picture's fine, so no problem. The keyboard is open like this. You can see in the picture here, the space bar was pretty yellow, so I'm retrobriding it right now. I'll give you a few clips of that. So I'll get that back. So I'm gonna 3D print the caps, retrobrite the space bar, and I'm not sure I'm gonna fix this or not. Maybe I'll leave that for another video. Typical, this is cracked, it's missing, broken, but it's sheared off really nice and flat. So I could probably 3D print something to make that happen. But I'll leave that one to another video, because in this video what I want to do is, I should have just kept the cover off when I replaced the PLA. This was an afterthought, but I thought, why not make a video of it? I'm going to install an ultra reset kit in here. And what this kit does is, you can get it, I think it's cbmstuff.com. I'll leave the link. But what this does is, well, I'll show you. On top of that, I'm going to be installing JiffyDOS in this thing to make the drive load times a little faster. So what this will do once it's installed is it will allow me to use the reset switch here to do several things. First of all, I can use the reset switch, holding it down for an X amount of time, to change the device number on the drive from 8 to 9. And the other thing I can do is, if I hold it down a little bit longer, is I can basically switch kernels between JiffyDOS and the normal kernel. Otherwise, typically when you install JiffyDOS, you'd have to put a switch, a toggle switch. That's why these things come with toggle switches. But in this case, with this little device that electronically handles the switching, you can use the reset button to switch devices between 8 and 9. And you can use the reset switch to also choose between the JiffyDOS kernel and the SX-64 kernel. So that's what we're going to be doing. So stay tuned. This will be fun. Hopefully you'll get something out of it. Hopefully I'll make a mistake or two even that you'll learn from. So coming up, let's 3D print the caps and the space bar, and let's get those things out of the way. And then let's hit the electronics next. Stay tuned. Okay, so we left this overnight. I think we're ready to see the final results here. Keyboard looks nice and white. I'll just bring it over to the sink here and get all that peroxide washed off. All right, I think this is ready to go back on. This turned out really nice. So there you go. Let's continue this process here. Okay, so you saw the clip on the retrobriding. Finished the retrobriding process. Here's the final space bar. It's looking mighty clean. White, white, white. So we're going to put that back together. I also 3D printed the caps for the side handles. I never print more than one set of anything in case something, the quality isn't good on any of them. So I printed 3 sets. They all came out pretty nice. So I 3D printed with this being on the bottom, and it comes out nice and shiny and smooth. You can see there's no print lines on it, so that worked out. That worked out pretty well. I got the STL from Thingiverse, so can't take credit for doing the CAD file on these. Someone did the grunt work already, and I'll leave a link to that. They should be thanked for providing that. There's a quarter here, and why do I have a quarter here? Well, I'm going to show you in a second. So first of all, let's go ahead and put this space bar back. There's little tabs. Normally I would go ahead and just take this out and redo the Mylar, but let's leave that for another video. Otherwise this will be quite lengthy. So I'm going to put this back where it came from. And then let's get this snapped back into place here. Okay, faceplate just clicks back into place. Now, what the heck was the quarter all about? To take the faceplate off, I slide the quarter, there's a little gap between the case, there we go, now it's clicked into place. Between the case and the faceplate, there's a little gap there. The quarter fits perfectly in that gap. And if you put the quarter in and twist it, you hear that? It unclicks the faceplate to make it easy to get off the keyboard. And you just click on the other side as well, and there. So that's how you take the faceplate off really easy without damaging anything or breaking the tabs. And then just click everything back in place when you're done. So that's what the quarter was for. The side and the caps here for the sides, basically we'll just put some double-faced tape here. I sometimes use glue, white glue, because it's easy to take off and pull because the little foam things are still there. So anyways, we'll just put a little bit of double-faced tape or glue on there, and these should go right in. So that's how we'll take care of that. All right. So let's get this thing apart and let's get down to business with the Ultra Reset switch and JiffyDOS. Stay tuned. We're going to open this up. We're going to do two things. First of all, we're going to install JiffyDOS on it. This makes the drive load times faster. We're going to replace the switch, and that'll be the second thing that we're going to also install on this. The reason this comes as a switch is that it allows you to disable the kernel, the C64 kernel. And the reason you wanted to do that, not so much on the SX because it doesn't have a cassette port, but on the Commodore 64 there was a cassette port, and the JiffyDOS uses some of the same addresses as the cassette port, so it made the cassette port non-functional. So if you wanted to use the cassette on the C64, you would have had to disable the JiffyDOS kernel. Also, there might be some games, some fast loaders that might interfere as well, so you'd have a switch, in order to turn the kernel off. Actually, in order to revert the kernel from the JiffyDOS kernel to the C64, the original kernel. So anyways, we're going to install a JiffyDOS in here, but we're going to be replacing the switch with this other circuit that we'll build here, and this is called the Ultra 64 Reset. And this is by a gentleman named Jim Drew, that CBM stuff, I think. I'll put the link in the description, but I believe it's called cbmstuff.com or something like that. Anyways, or it might even be written on the circuit board somewhere. Anyways, what this does is it allows the reset switch on the Commodore 64 to have some functionality. If you hold it down for a few seconds, it'll change the default drive number from 8 to 9. If you hold it down for a few seconds longer, it'll turn off, or it'll switch JiffyDOS on and off, going back and forth between the original kernel and the JiffyDOS kernel. Anyways, there's some functionality that I'll go through this. With this, it also has a full reset as well. So anyways, so we're going to do both. Since we're going to have the computer apart, we're going to install both of them, and I'm going to show you how to do it with minimal effort. I do this on all my SS64s. I must have like about a dozen of them now. So this is kind of like, I can do this in the dark type of thing. So I'll show you how I do it without taking the whole, thing apart or taking all the boards out. So that's what we're going to do. When you buy these things, there's typically 3 or 4 things that are just the norm on them. The drive sometimes out of alignment, of course, because it's bulky, gets tossed around, it's portable, what have you. The keyboard is just a general failure. I don't think I've ever had one where I hadn't had to clean the keyboard up. There's little, the little things here that you'll see that I'm 3D printing new ones for the sides. They're little teal colored caps that go, over this thing. And if you're going to take the caps off, or if it doesn't come with caps, usually the handle is really loose. So there's a screw here that you can tighten down that'll tighten the handle from loosening up, because a lot of these handles, especially over time, I mean, the thing's like 20 plus years old, right? The screw here comes loose, and even though the little teal cap here prevents it from coming out too far, nonetheless, when the screw gets loosened up, the whole handle gets loosened up. So that's the other thing. So if you get one of these and and you have the caps removed, be careful, because that screw tends to come loose. So that's really one of the reasons why you want the cap on there, to prevent this from coming loose and falling out. So anyways, that's that. Let's get this thing started, and yeah, we'll show you how this is going to go. Okay, first things first, we're going to turn this puppy around here, because there's a few screws that we're going to need to take off. And I'm also going to take off lower that handle, so it's easier to deal with when it's lowered. So let's do that. Okay. So you've probably seen this in one of my earlier videos. There's a few screws that need to come out. There's one on the top left here. There's one on the top right. Okay, and then on each side there's 2 screws that hold the little side panels that slide out. Okay, so these are the screws from the back. Okay, I'll put those aside. And so now the sides the little side panels should be able to slide out, and be careful with them. They're very fragile, they're very thin, because they have notches. Now's a good time to clean these. Okay, so take this one out as well. We'll put these aside. And then there are screws on the sides. On each side here, you're going to take the 3 top screws on each side out, and that will allow the top to come off. So now that we got the screws on the side and the back. This top should just lift right off. And there you go. So I'm going to prop this back up at an angle. I normally don't do that when I'm doing this, but I'll prop it back up at an angle so hopefully the camera can get a feel for what I'm doing here. Okay, so I positioned this. You can see this is the back of the computer. So the C64 kernel ROM, there's two chips that come with the JiffyDOS. One is the 64 kernel, you know, and then the other one is the 1541, the disk drive kernel. So the C64 kernel, this chip will go on this board. So we'll turn this thing around when we're ready to do that, and I'll show you where that goes. We're going to install the 1541 kernel, which goes on the 1541 on the disk board controller, which is this one right here. So the chip is going to replace the ROM, the middle, which is the middle IC on the very end here. It's the one in the middle. So you could take this thing apart and basically there's these little tabs, these little plastic tabs that you push out on either side and pull this out a little bit. You know, you have to unplug a bunch of wires and stuff like that. So I forego that. You could do it that way. I kind of don't bother with it. So what I do instead is I just move some of these wires out of the way to give me the clearance that I need to get to that chip that I need to take out here. Okay, and that chip is going to be this. Let me show you the tool I'm going to use actually. So I'm going to use this, and that's going to be this chip right here in the middle. So let me see if I can zoom in on this a little bit. Okay, so it's this guy. So I'm going to move this capacitor, gotta push it forward a little bit, that's in the way here. And note that this chip has 24 pins, but it's sitting on a 28 pin socket. So make sure you know the alignment, okay? The back pins go to the end here, leaving the two front pins open, okay? So I'm going to use this tool to just get underneath the chip and just kind of prod it up on both sides, or prod it up, and that way it'll loosen it and take it out. So you can see there, it's already out. Just need to reach in there and kind of grab it so it doesn't fall. All right, clean. So that's the ROM that we're replacing. Okay. So now, make sure you use the right one. This one's labeled SS-64. That's not the ROM we want. We want this one, the one that's labeled 1541. So I'm going to take that off of here. And here's the thing with the JiffyDOS. Be careful with the little wires that are soldered on. They're soldered on, they're very thin wires, and they're soldered on very weakly. So they are prone to break off. I can tell you that right now. So you want to be real careful with them. When you put this chip in, don't push down on the wires, because that's usually what causes them to break off. And we're not going to end up, because we're putting the ultra reset switch in here, that's going to electronically switch. We're not going to need the mechanical switch here. And we're going to end up not using the ground wire on this. But I still leave it on there because I like the originality, just in case, you never know. So that's the deal. So we're going to go ahead and manipulate this and make sure that when it goes in, it's just straight over the sockets. You don't want to bend these pins or not get all the pins in. That'll kind of suck. So, okay. I want to make sure that this end is towards the motherboard, not towards the speaker. So the wires go towards the speaker side and the other end goes towards the motherboard, and you want the pins here at the end to be flush against the end of the socket. So you'll have a couple of pins free on the socket on the front side. Okay. So there we go. Make sure all the pins are in. Everything looks good. Okay, easy peasy. So that was the 1541 ROM. Now the other ROM goes to the motherboard. So let's do that next here. Okay, so now we got this thing turned around. You can see this is the back. That's the motherboard. And the chip that we want to replace is this one right here in the middle. There's 3 chips here. You want the middle one. And again, note that this has 2 open sockets in the front. The notch on the chip goes towards the front, and you want it flush all the way to the rear socket. Okay, so let me see if I can zoom in on this. Hopefully you caught that. Okay, again, the chip we want is this one here in the middle. Notice there's 2 open sockets. So that's the one we want to replace. We do the same thing here as we did with the 1541 ROM. Is I use this little tool to get underneath the chip and then bend it up, and the chip should slide right out. Okay, so that's the ROM chip that we're, oops, sorry, here we go. That's the ROM chip that we're replacing.
Here you go.
Yeah, that's the ROM chip we're replacing. So you can see this notch goes towards the front of the computer, and this goes towards the rear, all the way flush with the socket. So that's what we're going to do. With our JiffyDOS, the kernel ROM. Okay, that goes towards the front, so the wires go to the front. This is the back, and flush against the back pins of the socket. Okay. The socket is pretty easily accessible here, so I don't really need the little tool I made to help me guide the chips in. So, okay, make sure the pins are perfectly lined up. And then with the thumb holding on the back of the motherboard, you just push this in and let the pins slide right in. Don't push against the wires, the little wires on it though. It's an easy way to get them to unsolder from the little circuit board that the ROM chip is on. Okay. So there we go. Kernel ROM's in place. So now let's test this, and I'll show you how to make sure that this works. Again, we're going to be getting rid of this switch here when we install the Ultra reset board. So, because that board will electronically do the switching for us. And we won't use the ground wires out of this, so we'll tape those up. But I still want to preserve them. I don't want to unsolder them from the chip. Again, you never know when you might want to put the switch in. So figure to leave everything kind of as intact as possible. So how do we test this? Easy. So let me zoom back out here and let me turn this computer back around, and basically we just plug it in and look at the screen. Okay, to test this, all we got to do is look at the screen and turn this on. So the switch here right now is, it's off camera, but it's set to short the white and the black wires together. So when we turn this on and look at the screen, okay, you'll see the screen. Let me see if I can. Says S64 basic version 2. So that's the normal ROM. That's the 64 kernel ROM. Okay, that shows up. So let's turn this off, and I'm going to flick the switch now, that mechanical switch, so it doesn't short out the black and the white wires. And it should say JiffyDOS is what it should say on the screen now. So there you go, JiffyDOS version 601. So that shows you that that the ROMs are in correctly, that everything works. So what we're going to do now is, I think we're ready to go and get ourselves situated for the Ultra reset board. Okay. So there, I adjusted the screen a little better so the refresh doesn't hit the camera. So again, that's with JiffyDOS. Flick the switch, turn it back on, and that's the normal 64 kernel. Okay, so we got this situated with JiffyDOS. You can stop here and, you know, basically make a hole for the switch in the back, but I like to preserve things as much as possible, so I don't want to really do that. And anyways, I also want the ability to switch the drive from drive 8 to drive 9. So that's why I'm going to install Jim Drew's Ultra Reset board here. So let me show you how that takes place. It's pretty cool. Like I said, I install them on all my on my SX-64's machines. Just love the thing. And it's really easy, pretty easy to install. You do have to have some soldering skills, some mechanical inclined. Is that a word? Anyways, you'll see what I'm going to do here in a second. So let's go on to the next part here. Okay, so first things first, we got to get this board put together. I buy them unbuilt. That's a little cheaper, but you can get them already built, but they're just so simple to put together, and it's just satisfying to me to be able to do it myself. So we're going to go ahead and take these components out of here and see what we have. I'm a raving fan of this board. So much cool stuff that it does for you without having to modify your computer a whole heck of a lot. There's just one modification you need to make to the computer, but it's internal and no one sees it. Okay. So not much to the board. Basically all it is an electronic switching device. Very simple layout. This is going to get screwed on to the inside of an existing screw on the SX-64. So Normally I would socket chips, but in this case, I mean, it's kind of irrelevant. I really, if something went wrong with the chip, it'd be easy to unsolder. There's only 8 pins. So let's go ahead and start. There's the IC, there's a resistor, a couple of transistors, and a capacitor. So you can get the schematic, or you can see what this does. I'll leave you a link to the makeup of this and to the CBM stuff store. You know, what's it called here? Actually, it's written on here. If the camera can hopefully zoom in on this. There we go. Okay, it's right there. What's it say? cbmstuff.com. Okay. All right. So let's do this. What do we want to start with first? Let's go ahead and start with let's start with the transistors. We'll do the IC last. The board already shows you the flat side of the transistors that come with it. It shows you how to mount it. Really easy. Okay, so there you go. So now we still have to solder the leads. And so the cool thing with the leads that they provide is that they are I thought that they were already kind of pre-stripped, but these didn't come pre-stripped. Some of the ones I've gotten in the past have come pre-stripped, so I'm gonna have to strip these and tin them, and then we'll be ready to go. All right, so that takes care of the soldering. That we needed to do. So red, blue, gray, yellow, green. All right, got all the pieces in. Now we're ready to get this thing in the SS-64, and I can't wait to show you what it does. So stay tuned. Okay, so now we're gonna work on putting the ultra reset in place. And it's not just the reset, I mean, it's the reset because it uses the reset button to do all the stuff it's gonna do. But this is gonna actually get screwed in right here using the screw that's already there, the existing screw. So all of these wires here go someplace, okay? So the first thing we're going to do, you know, a couple of the wires go to the reset. The first thing we're going to do is install the drive 8 to 9, the drive ID switch. So the first thing we're going to do is take these two plugs out here to give us some room to work with, and this one as well. Okay, so the drive select. Let me see if I can zoom in on this. Yes. So first thing we're going to do is, this is set to drive 8 right now, and it's drive 8, it's ID 8 because these are shorted here. If we unshort them by cutting the middle piece out, it makes it drive 9. So what we're going to do is basically cut a piece out and solder a wire to the bottom. That'll create the short that the top would have normally created to make it drive 8. So adding a wire to the bottom will either short or not short the bottom, so that way it can select which drive number corresponds to the drive. So we're going to go ahead and cut this little notch in the middle here. And I would suggest a real sharp knife. So we got a good cut. So the next thing we're going to do is we need to solder a little wire to the bottom. So we're going to put a little bead of solder to the bottom of this, and then we'll get the gray wire goes to that. So let's do that next. So I don't want to accidentally jump the two back together with the solder, so I'm just going to tape up a little bit of the top here. So the solder doesn't get it. Okay, so I'm going to come in here with the soldering iron and just put a little tiny drop of solder here. This little gray wire in there. I want to make sure there's enough solder on there. That purple wire doesn't come off, and it looks like it's going to be okay. Yeah, it's on there pretty strong. And then I'm going to go in there with a multimeter, make sure that I didn't short the top and the bottom. Okay, that's the top, and that's the bottom where the gray wire is. Top and the bottom, so I can be assured it's not shorted. That's probably the most intricate piece of this whole thing, quite honestly. So that is going to be the drive select. That's what that gray wire is. So there is another thing that we're going to do here. Well, we have a few more soldering things that we need to take place, but why don't we go ahead and get this thing mounted on here. So the next thing this board is going to need power. So we're going to get it from here. So let me see if I can zoom in on that. Okay. So we're going to get it from the middle, that little middle connector there. And that is going to be the red the red wire that we're going to put. Okay. Okay, so that is our power. Okay, so the next one is our reset, which is, our reset is taken from J5 here, the center pin of J5. So we're going to solder our blue wire to that right there. So don't know how well this is going to get picked up there, but that is next. And this is going to go on the center pin here. Okay, and that is going to be the blue wire. Okay. That blue is part of the reset. The other part is this yellow wire. Okay, that completes the circuit for the reset. Now this yellow wire, so let me zoom out here. It goes to one of the two leads here. Just from past experience, it's the left one. But you never know. So you're going to kind of slide it in there and then slide this in place. So it shorts that wire out. You might need to put a little bit more length on it. I think I'm fine with the way it is. Just slide that back in place. And that little wire should be there. Now, you're going to know if it's this pin or the other side here, because when you turn this on, if it's on the wrong pin, the drive will just keep recycling on and off, on and off, on and off. So that's how you know you're going to have to switch it over to the other pin. But I'm pretty sure it's this one here on the leftmost side. So that's the one we're going to choose, and that's the one we're going to go with, and we'll see what happens when we turn it back on. Now that pretty much leaves one wire left, and that's the green one. And that is the ROM select. And that's going to send a signal to the ROM, to the new kernel chips that we've put in and the ROM chip that we put in to enable or disable them. So let's do that next. Okay. So at least we have a nice new little toggle switch for our spare parts box. So again, I want to keep some of this stuff intact. You never know for the future, you know, so I'm going to keep these JiffyDOS wires and just put some shrink wrap around them, and just keep them intact. Okay, make sure that you take a look at your JiffyDOS kernel and ROM, because you need to send a signal. This green from the ultra reset needs it shoots the signal on or off to the ROM and the kernel, and you got to make sure that it's going to the signal, not the ground. And in this case, both the kernel and the ROM, the black was not ground. That was the signal. So the white was ground on the chip. So make sure you look at the chip and look for GND, it's on the corner, and make sure that you got your colors correct. You want the green from the ultra reset going to the signal, not the ground. The ground is irrelevant, so you don't need the ground. We're just saving the wires just because we want to just save the whole, wiring things. You got to be real careful with that. Something like that could fry your CIA chip on the drive board. And trust me, I know that from experience. I've replaced a couple of those CIA chips in my past, and one of them was because I made a mistake with the wiring on the JiffyDOS kernel. Okay, so now I think we're good to go. We're just going to do a little bit of wire management here. Okay, so now I think we're ready to test this thing. So let's turn this, well, it's already been turned around, so let's go ahead here. Okay, so right now I'm in the regular C64 basic. So if we hold the reset button and hold it down for roughly 8-9 seconds, it should switch to JiffyDOS. So I'm holding the reset button down here. Okay, there you go, JiffyDOS. No more mechanical switch. Okay, now if there's my device 8. So I'm going to just reset this, hold the button down for 2 seconds, and it'll reset, or no more than 2 seconds, and it'll reset the drive. Okay, so that resets the drive. No more reset switch as well. So now that was drive 8. If I hold this down for about the reset button for about 6 seconds, I should be able to load drive, make that drive 9. So you can see drive 9 right now is not, device not present. So let's hold this down for about 6 seconds. Okay. Now drive 8 isn't found. And you can see drive 9. I'll put it back to drive 8. And there you go. It's back to drive 8. So 4 main things that you can do now with the reset switch here. You can reset the drive just by holding the button down for a second. You can reset the computer if you hold it down for like 4 seconds. So let's try that. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's like having a reset switch, resets the computer. You can change the drive number by holding the button down for about 6 or 7 seconds. And then you can go back and forth between JiffyDOS, which we installed, and the regular kernel by holding the reset button down for about 8 seconds, 9 seconds. So this gives you a lot of flexibility with the reset button without having mechanical switches. The other nice thing about this is that it saves the settings on power off. So it'll remember that you were in JiffyDOS last. It'll remember that you were in drive 8 not last, or drive 9 last. So if I turn this back on, I should be coming right back to JiffyDOS because that's the last thing that was loaded. So there you go. So we got JiffyDOS on here. We installed the Ultra Reset switch, and I'm going to 3D print. Well, I already did. I'll just show you a little bit of it. I 3D printed the side caps that are missing from here, so we'll replace those. And the only thing is I'm using a different SX keyboard. The keyboard that came with this is absolutely atrocious. Only half the keys work. The other half that don't work, you have to hammer down on the keys, and that's typical of these membrane keyboards. So I'm going to make another video of how I fix the keyboard and replace the membrane. We'll clean the membrane first, and if that doesn't work, we'll replace it, because I do have replacements. So anyways, give me a little bit, let me put this back together, and we'll wrap this up. Okay, so I think we're ready to wrap this up. Just some finishing touches, and we can put this on the shelf with all the rest. So I 3D printed a few of these little the little caps that go on the side. I printed a bunch of them at once, that way I can take the better looking of the ones. They all came out pretty decent though. So we're going to use these two. So in our case, they still have the little foam on the side here. So I'm not going to bother taking it out. It's stuck on there pretty good. I've already tightened the screws, on the side as well, so that's already done. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm just going to put a little bit of glue. White glue, that way it's easy to heat and take off if I need to down the road. So we're just going to put just a little tiny bead of glue on the inside here. That'll get onto this little foamy part, and if we ever do need to take it off, we can just put a little heat onto it and pop it right out, and you can always replace that sticky stuff inside with 3M Scotch double face tape if we need to. But so that'll take care of that side. Man, I pity the folks that had to lug this thing around. This might have been the first portable. Luggable is probably more apt. Also notice with these, if you 3D print, they've got little tiny embosses in them and recesses and all that stuff. They just kind of snap into place in the right position. So we got some glue on there. There we go. So it needs a little bit more glue on the top. Okay. And then we'll just leave that sit overnight. And that will be that. So, there you have it. A nice new SX-64 for the collection with some nice little extras such as the side caps, Ultra Reset, and JiffyDOS. That would have been quite a machine back in the day. So 2 future videos out of this is one, cleaning up and taking care of this keyboard, replacing the membrane on it. So that's one thing that we're going to do. And then the other is these things always break off on the top here. If it's not the keyboard latch, it's this thing. Fortunately, the latches on the keyboard here are intact, but we do have 3D printed resin ones that are perfect replacement for those. This, unfortunately, is part of the entire bezel. So this one will take a little creativity. It's a little thing that sticks out, basically, and that captures the little latch from the keyboard underneath. So we'll have to get creative because there isn't a whole lot of material here, you know, to play with. So we'll figure that one out as well. So that'll be another video coming up soon. In the meantime, I think that we've exhausted this one. So hope you got something out of this, maybe learned something. Don't forget, if you use JiffyDOS and you use that Ultra Reset board, make sure that you're using the green wire on the Ultra Reset to the signal wires on the JiffyDOS kernel and the JiffyDOS ROM. I once got a kernel and a ROM that had the wires, each one of them were reversed differently. Black was ground on one and black was signal on the other. I ended up getting some of these sets where black is ground and signal is white, and other sets where black is signal and white. So make sure you check that, because if you don't, I have blown out CIA chips in the past because those weren't correct and I didn't take the time to check. So double check that. So again, hope you enjoyed the video. Like I always say, you only live once. Live for today. Do everything you want to do before it's the end. Peace out.